Welcome to Alfred Kazin Notes, a place where literature, ideas, and the minds of great writers come alive. Let's explore the thoughts behind the words.
Thank you. It's really great to be here for this.
So, usually when we navigate the world, we rely on this shared map.
Right, a consensus of reality.
Exactly. You walk down a gray concrete street, you see traffic, you see storefronts, and society functions because we all silently agree that, well, that is reality.
It's a practical. I mean, it keeps us safe, right?
Yeah, it does. But imagine a mind that looked at that exact same gray street and just flat out rejects the concrete.
Just completely overwrites it.
Right. Instead of a sidewalk, they see this golden path. Instead of honking cars, they hear like the trumpets of a royal guard.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly that shared map is shredded. We're staring into a landscape where the boundary between a beautiful dream and absolute madness is completely dissolved.
And that dissolution is, it's really the ultimate collision, isn't it? The collision between the world as it objectively is and the world as we desperately, perhaps necessarily, wish it could be.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We are setting out on an independent, critical reflection of Miguel de Cervantes' absolute masterpiece, Don Quixote.
A truly monumental text.
It really is. It's universally hailed not just as the starting point of the modern novel, but truly as the sacred text of modern literature. And we're bypassing the dry academic paper citations today.
Thankfully.
Right. Instead, we are going on an immersive literary analysis of the human spirit itself.
Which is fitting for a text of this magnitude.
Absolutely. Because to understand the sheer gravity of what we are dealing with here, to consider this, Don Quixote is the most read book in human history, right after the sacred texts of the three monotheistic religions.
That is just, I mean, that's a staggering statistic when you really think about it.
It is a 17th century story about a confused man and his neighbor sits right behind the Bible and the Quran. And Fyodor Dostoevsky actually captured the weight of this perfectly. He called Don Quixote the final and greatest utterance of the human mind, the most bitter irony that a human can express.
Dostoevsky pointing to that bitter irony is just, it's crucial. He is highlighting an incredibly uncomfortable truth that Cervantes tapped into.
Which is?
The realization that the higher human ideals are, well, they're fundamentally incompatible with the machinery of the real world.
Right. And I want to invite you, the listener, to do something a little radical with us today. Put aside the modern world for a moment.
Leave it all behind.
Yeah, ignore your endless notifications. Forget about your daily efficiency hacks. Step with us into the dusty, sun-baked plains of 17th century Spain.
We are going to examine a really timeless question here.
We are. What actually happens when a noble, purely idealistic spirit collides head-on with a harsh, relentlessly prosaic reality?
But to even approach that question, we cannot start with the knight himself.
Yeah.
No, we have to start with the crucible of the creator. The legacy of this novel is inextricably linked to the brutal, lived reality of Miguel de Cervantes.
Because Spain at that time was not just harsh. Right?
No, it was an empire in a state of terminal decay. I mean, the Spanish Armada had been defeated, the country was bankrupt, and society was basically paralyzed by the paranoia of the Inquisition.
And Cervantes lived that decay in his own flesh.
He really did.
He did not write this from the comfort of some, aristocratic study. He was a literature-loving adventurer whose life reads like a Greek tragedy.
Just completely stripped of the catharsis.
Exactly. He fought in the Spanish Navy during the height of its brutal imperial conflicts. We're talking major bloody battles at Cyprus, Tunis, Navarino, and Lepanto, or Bacti.
Where he permanently lost the use of his left hand, by the way.
Right. He sacrificed his actual body for the grand narrative of the Spanish Empire.
And his reward for that sacrifice was just, well, it was catastrophic. On his way home, he was captured by Barbary pirates.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he spent 5 grueling years as a hostage in Algiers. 5 years completely stripped of his freedom, just waiting for a ransom from a homeland that had essentially forgotten him.
And even when he finally made it back to Spain, the nightmare just compounded.
He didn't get any better.
No. He took on these miserable government jobs as a tax collector and purchasing agent just to survive. But the system chewed him up.
It always does.
He was repeatedly thrown into prison on charges of corruption, financial discrepancies, even murder.
He was a man ruthlessly punished by the bureaucratic, cynical systems of the real world.
Right. And it was only after a lifetime of intense suffering, this total serfdom to reality, that he penned The Ultimate Dreamer, The Knight of La Mancha, in 1605.
So the modern novel isn't born from some sudden burst of inspiration.
Not at all. It's born from profound exhaustion.
What's fascinating here is the psychological mechanism Cervantes employs. Many literary theorists argue this makes Quixote not just the first modern novel, but actually the first postmodern one.
Oh, wow. Wait, how so?
Well, postmodernism often questions the very nature of truth, reality, and authorship, right? Cervantes takes his own profound trauma, the sheer unfairness of his existence, and he weaponizes it.
Okay, let's unpack this. He weaponizes his trauma.
Yes. He shatters the illusion of an objective narrator. He writes a book that constantly reminds you it is a book. He plays with fake translators and characters who, actually know they are being written about.
That is wild for 1605.
Right. He doesn't write a memoir of his suffering. Instead, he engineers a protagonist whose very existence is a rebellion against the concept of objective reality.
Okay, listening to you describe that, it feels as if Cervantes, after spending his entire life being repeatedly punched in the face by reality, decides to invent a protagonist who simply refuses to acknowledge the existence of fists.
That's a great way to put it.
Like he just edits the fists out of the source code. But this raises a really critical question about the text. Does Cervantes write Don Quixote to mock idealism? Like, to point and laugh at the foolishness of dreamers? Or is he secretly mourning the impossibility of idealism in a brutal mercantile world?
See, the tension between mocking the delusion and mourning the ideal, that is the engine of the entire narrative.
Right.
And this leads us to the transformation of Señor Quesada into Don Quixote. Señor Quesada, or Alonso, is a wealthy, respectable, but entirely unremarkable landowner.
Very mundane.
Exactly. And his fatal flaw is his obsession with chivalric romances. He squanders his entire fortune buying these books.
Until his estate falls into total ruin.
Yeah, and his body becomes just a mere shadow. He reads them until his brain physically dries up. He consumes the fantasy until the fantasy entirely consumes his reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Since anyone listening to this deep dive likely already knows the famous set pieces, the windmills.
Of course.
The transformation of a rundown inn into an impenetrable castle.
A pigherd's horn becoming a castle guard's trumpet.
Exactly. Or taking two peasant girls at the inn and seeing noble ladies. And, of course, renaming his bony, starving mare Rocinante.
And elevating a local peasant girl, Alonso Lorenzo, to the Empress Dulcinea del Toboso.
Right. So since we know all that, what we really need to examine is the psychological armor Quixote wears.
The defense mechanisms.
Yeah, when he charges the windmills, genuinely believing them to be giants, he gets completely wrecked. The physical world violently asserts its dominance.
It usually does.
Yet his mind refuses to break. He doesn't wake up on the ground, beaten and bruised by merchants and muleteers and say, wow, those were just grinding stones. I was wrong.
No. He invents the evil enchanter Freston.
Yes. Freston.
He claims Freston used magic to turn the giants into windmills at the very last second just to rob him of his glorious victory.
Which preserves his noble narrative at the cost of intense physical pain.
And that invention of the enchanter Freston is a brilliant literary manifestation of cognitive dissonance.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, it is basically a 17th century psychological patch. When deeply held beliefs are contradicted by undeniable physical evidence, the human mind doesn't usually abandon the belief.
It doubles down.
Exactly. It invents a conspiracy to bridge the gap. Freston is the patch in Quixote's mental software that allows him to preserve his core identity despite the very real bruises.
And underlying that delusion is a remarkably pure moral code, supposedly.
Right. His stated goal is to protect the weak, punish the wicked, and bring justice to a corrupt world.
Wait, I have to push back on the idea that his moral code is beautiful or pure in practice.
Oh.
Because while his intentions might be poetic, the collateral damage he causes is very real, and it's often super violent.
Well, that's true.
Look at the famous scene with the galley slaves. Quixote sees a chain gang of convicted criminals being marched down the road.
Right, being taken to the galleys.
Yeah. And because his chivalric code dictates that he must free the oppressed, he literally attacks the guards and releases actual dangerous murderers into the countryside.
He leaves total chaos in his wake.
Exactly. So how can we romanticize madness when it actively harms the society around him?
Well, that is the crux of the tragic irony. The intent is pure, but imposing a 14th century code of poetic, noble chivalry onto a 17th century prosaic society governed by commerce and law is inherently destructive.
It just doesn't fit.
The world does not want to be saved by poetry. It operates on self-interest, commerce, and violence.
And cynicism.
Right. When Quixote tries to enforce his ideals, the world responds with a physical beating, and people he supposedly saves usually end up worse off. He is a man out of time, speaking a moral language no one else understands.
That disconnect feels strikingly modern to me.
How so?
It's as if Quixote is a man walking onto a busy 8-lane highway wearing a tightly strapped-on virtual reality headset.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. And the VR goggles are programmed to only show him a world of perfect justice and romantic quests.
So he doesn't see the cars?
Exactly. Every time a semi-truck hits him, every time reality violently intrudes, he doesn't take the headset off. He just alters his own mental code and tells himself the truck was a dragon.
Because taking off the goggles means facing the highway.
Yes. It means accepting that justice and nobility are illusions. And for a spirit like his, that realization is literally a fate worse than death.
But a man wearing VR goggles on a highway needs a guide if he is going to survive the afternoon, right?
Right, definitely does.
Which brings us to the brilliant duality of the novel. The sky-gazing aristocratic Quixote and his earthbound peasant squire, Sancho Panza.
You cannot have the philosophical weight of this text without the grounding gravity of Sancho.
No, you really can't.
We all know the visual contrast, right? The tall, gaunt knight and the short, plump squire. But Sancho isn't just a physical foil or a comedic sidekick.
He's the practical, realistic symbol of the common people.
He is the ultimate representative of pragmatic survival.
Think about you, the listener, for a moment. Have you ever stayed in a soul-crushing job or a deeply flawed situation simply because the promised payout, like the bonus structure or promotion, was too good to walk away from?
Oh, I think we all have.
That is the Sancho inside you. He follows a madman because Quixote promised to make him the governor of an island. He is motivated by material gain.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Sancho is the voice of empirical truth.
He is.
He constantly attempts to tether Quixote to the material world. When Quixote claims a brass barber's basin is the magical golden helmet of Mambrino, Sancho points out the brass.
When Quixote sees grand armies, Sancho hears the bleating of sheep.
Exactly. Quixote and Sancho represent the two halves of the human spirit, the mind that yearns for the eternal and noble, and the physical body that needs food, safety, and comfort.
But isn't it more than just a rich man, poor man dynamic? I mean, if we limit their relationship to a simple mind and body dichotomy, we miss the profound literary achievement of Cervantes, which is how they infect each other.
Yes. Over the course of the text, Sancho begins to fiercely protect the very delusions he once mocked.
The literary terms for this are the Quixotization of Sancho and the Sanchification of Quixote.
It's brilliant. I mean, Sancho takes terrible beatings. He gets tossed in a blanket by a mob at an inn. He suffers immensely for a delusion he knows is objectively false.
Yet he stays.
He stays. He becomes a willing participant in the dream. Why? Because he discovers that a life infused with meaning, even if that meaning is entirely fabricated and delusional, is actually better than a life of mere survival.
And that transformation is so clear later in the novel.
Oh, within Duke and Duchess.
Yes. Through a deeply cruel, elaborate prank played by these wealthy aristocrats, Sancho actually gets his island. They force him to govern an actual town just to mock him.
The ultimate joke.
Right. And what happens? Sancho realizes that the bureaucratic nightmare of governance, the stress of power, and the cynicism of the ruling class are abhorrent.
The aristocrats playing the joke are the true monsters of the book.
Exactly. It makes Quixote's madness look dignified by comparison. So Sancho resigns. He realizes he prefers his simple life, his beloved donkey, and the open road.
He ends up loving the adventure of the quest more than the material reward. He is completely infected by the poetry of his master.
He recognizes that a world governed by Quixote's madness, even with all its collateral damage, is fundamentally kinder and more purposeful than the transactional reality of Spain.
Gravity, however, gravity always wins.
It does. The shared dream cannot survive the crushing weight of reality indefinitely.
No, which means we have to examine the devastating climax of Quixote's journey. And it's not a glorious death in battle.
Or affirm it.
It is a heartbreaking return to sanity.
And the ending is a masterclass in psychological devastation, really, because the tragedy is brought about by those who genuinely love him.
That's the hardest part to read.
The world, embodied by his well-meaning friends from his village, simply refuses to let Quixote exist outside the margins of normalcy.
The local priest and the barber, Nicola, are determined to quote-unquote cure him.
Right.
And they use Quixote's own logic against him, which is just so cruel. Nicola disguises himself as the Knight of the White Moon.
A brilliant, terrible trap.
He tracks Quixote down to the shores of Barcelona. They duel. And Quixote, who is old, exhausted, riding a starving horse, is violently unhorsed and defeated on the sand.
And the Knight of the White Moon forces him to swear an oath.
According to the very rules of chivalry Quixote lives by.
Yes, he must put down his weapons and retire to his home for 1 full year.
Checkmate.
It really is. It is a psychological intervention masquerading as the joust. They believe they are saving the man by destroying the delusion.
But they don't get it.
What they fail to understand is that identity is a narrative. Stripped of his armor, stripped of the story he tells himself, Don Quixote ceases to exist.
He returns to his village not as a hero, but as a deeply broken man. He falls into a deep, incurable melancholy.
His spirit just completely breaks.
And on his deathbed, the fever breaks. He wakes up from the dream. He repents his chivalric follies, dictates his will, and declares to the room that he is no longer Don Quixote de la Mancha.
He says he is simply Alonso Quijano the Good, a sane, dying man.
The philosophical weight of this ending is just staggering.
It is because the cure is fatal. Sanity brings death.
Wow.
By shattering his illusions, his friends sever his tether to life. He realizes the world is devoid of giants, of magic, and of ultimate justice, and without the glory of that narrative, his physical body simply shuts down.
So what does this all mean for us? Because the true emotional climax isn't Alonso dying.
No, it's Sancho's reaction.
Yes, Sancho Panza weeping uncontrollably at the bedside. The ultimate realist, the man who spent hundreds of pages pointing out windmills and sheep, is now begging to keep the fantasy alive.
It is the final, complete role reversal.
He begs Quixote not to die. He pleads with him to get out of bed so they can go to the fields, dress up as shepherds, and live inside a pastoral romance.
Sancho's plea validates the madness. It proves that mere survival, a life devoid of an overarching myth or purpose, is just a slow way of waiting to die. The human heart cannot survive on cold, hard facts alone.
And this brings the deep dive out of 17th century Spain and directly into your life today.
Right into the present.
You listening right now, you may not be wearing rusty armor or riding a bony horse, but every single day you navigate the intense friction between your highest ideals and the often disappointing, highly transactional reality of modern society.
You hold a map of how the world should be.
And you're constantly forced to walk on the concrete of how it actually is.
Which leaves us with a lingering, vital question to mull over.
Let's hear it.
If Quixote's madness was his desperate mechanism for finding nobility in a corrupt world, what are our modern windmills?
Oh, that's a great question.
We exist in an era of curated digital personas, right? Of algorithmic echo chambers that feed us bespoke realities.
Are those our chivalric romances?
Exactly. We might ask ourselves, are we truly the pragmatic, cynical realists we pride ourselves on being? Or are we all, in some quiet, desperate way, donning our own invisible armor, constructing grand narratives just to fight against the unbearable weight of the ordinary?
Are we all just wearing different VR headsets on the exact same highway?
I think we might be.
The next time you encounter a giant in your own life, take a second look. It might just be a windmill. But then again, perhaps the world is fundamentally better when we choose to fight the giants. Keep exploring the thoughts behind the words.